Imagine a country so small that its entire population could fit inside a single major city, a country made up of tiny volcanic islands in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, a country most football fans couldn't even find on a map. Yet, somehow, this tiny nation earned a place on the same stage as football giants, the same World Cup stage where football empires spend billions, produce world-class stars, and dominate headlines. And what's happening right now is making football fans around the world ask one question: how did they get here? This is the unbelievable story of Cape Verde, a nation of just 600,000 people that refused to stay invisible. And by the end of this video, you'll discover the incredible secret that turned one of the world's smallest countries into a World Cup story nobody saw coming. Before we talk about football, you need to understand just how small Cape Verde really is. Cape Verde is located off the west coast of Africa. It's not one big country on a continent. It's a collection of 10 small islands scattered across the Atlantic Ocean. The population? Around 600,000 people. That's smaller than many cities around the world. In fact, some football clubs have more social media followers than the entire population of Cape Verde. For decades, almost nobody expected Cape Verde to compete with football powers. No giant football academies. No massive domestic league. No endless supply of superstar players. If you looked only at the numbers, Cape Verde had almost no chance. And that's exactly why this story is so fascinating. Because football isn't played on spreadsheets. It's played by people. And sometimes belief can overcome statistics. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Cape Verde discovered a hidden advantage. Over many decades, large numbers of Cape Verdeans moved abroad. Today, there are huge Cape Verdean communities spread across Portugal, France, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and other European countries. And that changed everything. Young players with Cape Verdean roots grew up inside some of Europe's best football systems. They trained in professional academies. They learned from elite coaches. They competed at a high level. Then came the big decision. Should they represent larger football nations? Or represent the country their families never forgot? Many chose Cape Verde. And suddenly, this tiny island nation gained access to football talent developed across Europe. It was like finding a hidden resource that nobody else noticed. The country was still small, but its football dream became much bigger. At first, many people assumed Cape Verde's success would be temporary, a lucky generation, a brief moment, a team that would eventually disappear. But Cape Verde kept proving people wrong, year after year, tournament after tournament. They became one of Africa's toughest teams to face, not because they had the biggest stars, not because they spent the most money, but because they were organized, disciplined, and fearless. The players understood something important. Every match was an opportunity to represent a nation that rarely received global attention. And that created a level of motivation that money can't buy. Slowly but surely, Cape Verde climbed higher. The impossible started looking possible. Then one day, the dream became reality. The World Cup, the biggest stage in football, a tournament watched by billions. And somehow, one of the world's smallest nations had made it there. Now let's talk about why this story is even more incredible. When most fans looked at the World Cup groups, they immediately focused on the traditional giants, the countries with famous players, the countries with massive football histories, the countries expected to dominate. Cape Verde wasn't supposed to be part of that conversation. But that's exactly what makes the World Cup special. Every tournament creates a surprise. Every tournament creates a story. And Cape Verde became one of those stories. Because every time they stepped onto the pitch, they weren't just representing a football team. They were representing an entire nation. A nation that had spent decades being overlooked. A nation that most football fans barely knew existed. A nation now standing shoulder to shoulder with football powers. And suddenly millions of people around the world were discovering Cape Verde for the very first time. But before we finish, There's one unbelievable fact that makes this story even crazier. Ready? The population of Cape Verde is smaller than the yearly attendance of many major football stadiums. Think about that for a moment. Some clubs welcome more fans through their gates in a single season than the total number of people living in Cape Verde. Yet this tiny island nation reached the exact same World Cup stage as football superpowers. Let that sink in. Countries with populations of 50 million, 100 million, 200 million. And then there's Cape Verde, a nation of only around 600,000 people, competing against them all. That's not supposed to happen. But somehow it did. And that's why people love this story. Because deep down, everyone loves an underdog. Whether Cape Verde goes all the way or not isn't really the point. They've already achieved something extraordinary. They forced the football world to notice them. They proved that size doesn't determine success. Population doesn't determine success. Money doesn't determine success. Belief does. Determination does. Courage does. Cape Verde may be one of the smallest countries at the World Cup, but their story is one of the biggest. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Sometimes the greatest football stories don't come from the biggest nations. They come from the nations that never stopped believing they belong. And that's exactly why the world is watching Cape Verde. Not because they're supposed to win, but because they proved that impossible dreams can become reality. To know more interesting facts about this tournament, subscribe my channel ND, hit the like button. Also share your comment what you think about this team and how will they perform in this World Cup 2026. Thanks for watching.